What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So yesterday was Fed Day. I love watching Fed Day. It just cracks me up to watch the president of the Federal Reserve come out and talk, because it's just blatant lie after lie. But it is interesting just to see, like, they're actually going to do this. Like, they're literally making a choice between the currency or asset prices. And the decision that they made yesterday, when the market was put on like 600 points of gains, which is, positive day, market's crazy, okay, it's going up, going higher, because, the debt market is in good shape. Well, what happened there was the market was expecting there to be some sort of rate hike. Not like a real rate hike, because if they're saying that inflation is 7%, even though it's not, because it's like 20 or 30% on the stuff I buy, I'm sure the stuff you buy. But if they say the inflation is 7%, then you need to raise the interest rates to like 9% to kill inflation. They basically get rid of inflation. What they did yesterday was they came out and they were expected to raise rates, not like to 9%, not to 1%, not to 2%, but they were expected to be like, we're going to raise the percentage by like 25 basis points, which is essentially 1/4%, like nothing. But everyone was kind of expecting this. What happened was when they admitted that they weren't going to raise the interest rates, one, it signaled how bad things really are. Obviously, they were like, the labor market's great, the recovery's so good, all this stuff. But it was like, holy cow, the Federal Reserve knows that this is really bad. We thought it was kind of bad, but they know how bad it really is. It just, I'm having a hard time processing it in a way, because I'm like, wow, they're really going to sacrifice the currency. Like, they're actually going to do this. Like they're looking at the cliff and they're like, yeah, we're going to ride this thing over the cliff, man. And you're like, okay, so what's the game plan? And they're like, we got parachutes. I don't know what your plan is, but we got parachutes and we're out. And so it's really fascinating, because you would have to raise the interest rates. When you say 7, you'd have to raise them to like 9 to make it, justified. Obviously, what happens to the new car market if you raise them interest rates to 9%? What happens to the housing market if you raise interest rates to 9%? What happens to basically the entire economy if you choose to raise interest rates to the correct level, which would be about 9%? What's really hilarious is that we are centrally planning something as crazy as the price of money. Like, we don't centrally plan hardly anything. I mean, maybe we do to an extent, but like the price of whatever, the market just figures it out. Price of gas, price of Netflix subscriptions, price of cell phones, whatever it may be. It's just a market function. But when it comes to the currency and the currency supply and the cost to borrow money, well, there's like a group of like 12 people that make up this decision, and one of them makes the final decision. That's the president of the Federal Reserve, the real president of the United States. And so they came out yesterday and they're like, no, we're not going to raise the interest rate. And the market, which had went up 600 points prior, dumps and finishes 100 points negative, because the entire market was like, yo, we kind of get it, you got to raise the rates, we understand. And they came out and they were like, no, we're not going to raise the rates. And the market was like, oh, things are that bad, huh? And so they sold off. Now, obviously, it'll recover. The market's kind of like crazy and sporadic at this point in time. But it really just, like, I sat back and I was like, holy cow, this is going to happen. Like, they're literally choosing between, do you want to keep asset prices propped up, meaning that certain people that aren't in the housing market can't get in the housing market, certain people that need to borrow for productive projects and things like that can, but then there's an over borrowing from malinvestment, or causes malinvestment because there's too much borrowing. Essentially, the cost of borrowing is under the true rate of borrowing. The real rate of borrowing should be somewhere around 9% or higher. And they're keeping it really low, so therefore projects that shouldn't ever be funded can get funded. The other thing that you have to consider here is, like, the U.S. government owes $30 trillion in debt. Now, over the course of the next 10 years, a little grind until you find it game. And over the course of the next 10 years, they're going to have to spend $180 trillion based on commitments that the government has already made. These are like your pensioners, your Social Security people, healthcare commitments, all that type of stuff that they've made. They're going to have to spend an extra $180 trillion. Just to put this into context for you, the government takes in about $4 trillion a year. $4 trillion a year in revenue, taxes. If they were to take their debt, $30 trillion, and have to pay a 9% interest on that debt as it rolls over, obviously. If they were to have to do that, they'd be paying approximately $3 trillion on their debt, a little less, but $3 trillion on their debt when they take in 4, which means they can't run the government on 4 because they spend more than 4 every year. but they would have to, 75% of everything they take in would go to pay the debt, and then they would have to run the government on what's remaining, obviously, if they were truly paying, I mean, just to pay the interest on the debt. It's an impossible situation. So everyone knows they can't raise the interest rates. But what that means is they have to pick between one or the other. If they do choose to raise the interest rates, all assets fall. Houses, cars, 401k, stocks, everything dumps, right? You have a little bit of a depression, and you're gonna have to work that out. The strongest will survive, the weak will perish. That's the way nature should work. But instead, they're like, no, we're gonna keep this game going as long as possible, and we're gonna just sacrifice the currency. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, devaluation of maybe 50%. We'll just take the national debt, which is 3 trillion or 30 trillion, and we'll just like cut it in half via inflation. Meaning like, yeah, it might be 30 trillion, but it doesn't matter because the dollar is only half as valuable. So, you know, it's not a big deal. We'll just inflate the debt away. It's really an impossible situation that they're in, and it's something that I have an opinion on. I think that this is the transition that we do see. I know people hate crypto. There's some of you in this audience that hate crypto, but like, where's the parachute? You could go to silver and gold standards, great, but just to revalue everything according to silver and gold standards, you still have like epic depressionary situation. The helicopter smooth elevator landing I see is they inflate the currency, cryptos inflate with it, and at some point in time, the average pleb, like the populace, is like, dude, I'd rather just have Bitcoin than dollars because there's 21 million of them, and there's like infinite trillions of dollars. And so at some point in time, people just slowly start going like, I'd rather have Dogecoin because there's 130 billion of them, but there's just infinite trillions of dollars, right? Like eventually people just go, give me Litecoin, give me anything that's not the US dollar. And there's just like this migration to crypto. I know a lot of you guys are like, oh, it's a bubble, this and that, but it's like, it's kind of the parachute, and it's kind of like what you have to work with. Or you just have like a complete economic collapse, which people won't be accepting of because people like things to work. You like the lights to work, you like the grocery stores to work, you like stuff to work. And so they're gonna need something to trade. And essentially what crypto is a digital battery. It's just a battery of electricity. It basically represents how much electricity was spent to mine this thing. Okay, cool, I can trade you that. I feel like it would be great. It would be great if it had like a little bit more use case, like it was a little bit more physical in its presence. Like you were able to download that onto some sort of like small coin and it did have a kilowatt of power in there and you could run things on it. That would be awesome, but I don't think we're totally there yet. But ultimately, we're trying to trade at a very primitive level, arguably. We're trying to trade electricity as the commodity, or metal as the commodity, instead of fake belief in paper and government. But at the moment, the government has basically said, like, hey, enough plebs believe us still, so we'll just keep inflating the currency. And I look at this going like, eventually the plebs aren't gonna believe you anymore. And there's gonna be like this epic shakeout. And that's like silver goes to the moon, gold goes to the moon, Bitcoin goes to the moon. And then at which point, you know, Bitcoin might become extremely stable. Like you could get to $1 million or $5 million Bitcoin and it moves 1% this way or that way. And people are like, well, this is boring. You know, like right now it can move 50% in a course of a month or a week. But eventually, as they continue to inflate and people just continue to migrate over, and that's what I see happening, is just this migration over. Maybe not now, maybe it's early days. I mean, Bitcoin is literally like a fifth of Apple computers. I mean, you could literally buy 5 of the Bitcoin. Like you could literally buy like the entire crypto space, everything in it, twice by just selling all of Apple stock. So it's a baby. I mean, it's still a very, very baby. But I don't see any other option here because like basically the elites are like, dudes, we're gonna keep the assets high and keep them inflating. And we're just gonna sacrifice the currency. That's just what we're gonna do. Or they will raise the interest rates and they'll have everybody indebted because people are putting credit card gas in their car, they're leasing it, they're buying houses they can't afford, or like all that stuff. And then eventually they do raise the interest rates. This is really what I see happening. And people default and the bank owns it all, the bank. And this is just like very, very typical of central banks throughout history. The goal of a central bank is to own it all. Like you're not trying to be a bank, you're not trying to be the bank, you're trying to be like the end all be all of all things in the entire planet. You own it all. It's like the ultimate domination of a culture, society, and a globe. by a very, very small few, the banking class, and they use absolute idiots in the political class to continue to accomplish their ends. They essentially go, oh, politicians, spend trillions of dollars all you want and we'll finance it. We'll continue to print this for you. We'll continue to monetize the debt. And the politicians are like, great, because they're idiots, right? Politicians are basically lizard people. And they're just like out there giving everything to their friends and enriching all their political, interests. And the bankers are like, this is great, because the politicians are essentially keeping us in a position where we can't raise the debt, and the politicians control the military, as much as we hate to admit it, they do. And we're in this spot where the central bankers have a free pass to do anything they want. The other really interesting thing that happened last night is like futures were down like 400 points, which if you're not in the market, that's a pretty interesting activity going on. In the morning, they're up. Somebody or something, or a lot of people, went in there last night at the close of business and throughout the entire night and started buying up US assets. Could it be the central bank? They're not allowed to do that. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 says they're not allowed to do that, but we've never audited the Fed. The Fed has never had an audit. Like, they're literally enslaving an entire group of people called the middle class, because they're pricing these people out of assets, they're pricing them out of housing, they're pricing them out of fuel, out of cars, and they're essentially saying, hey, New World Order, get with the program. By 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy. What does that mean? That means, no, you can't afford a car or the gas to put in it. You can't afford a house or any of that stuff. But it's cool because we want you to have everything on a subscription service, ideally digitally, so it's easy for us, easy for you. We don't need a billing department. We can just we can just have full control and run some AI to essentially keep everybody enslaved. And we're gonna have to do this because of all the VaxPass cheaters, like all those people printing out fake VaxPasses and stuff. Like, we're gonna have to, and it's just amazing to me because in the Western world, you people have let this happen. Which is just incredible to me, because you have no concept of, like, there was this point in time where the king taxed tea at 6%, and he did a few other really dickish things. Like, he was like, oh, you like cast iron, that's cute, you have to buy it from Britain. And the colonialists were like, yeah, well, we kind of can make it here. And he's like, nope, you have to literally buy it from overseas, and then you can ship it in and pay a tax on it. And the colonialists were finally, the tea was their final straw, and they were like, 6% on tea? Bodies are gonna drop. And the American pleb at this point in time is so fat, fake, and gay that he can't get off his ass for a single moment to literally clean his rifle and prepare for what will probably have to happen. And instead just goes, oh, well, there's some inflation out there, man, I guess so. And they're not waking up to this, which is like, all right, that's fine. As a kulak here, as an anarchical capitalist, I get it. I'm not gonna be able to save the world. I might be able to save one person at a time. But ultimately, just get on the right side of this. If you're watching this, just get on the right side of this. Invest like the elites. Invest in assets like silver, like gold, like copper, like cryptos that are outside of the system, because who else do you think is buying this crap up? I mean, the largest holder of silver at the moment is JP Morgan. They also have paid almost $1 trillion in fines. No, they paid $1 billion in fines. Excuse me, it's a zero. It's a major zero mistake, my error. They've paid 850 billion. Oh shoot, it's billion or million. They get fined all the time. I'll have to look this up. Maybe someone can throw it in the comments. JP Morgan's constantly getting in trouble for manipulating the silver market, but yet they're the largest holder of silver. It's like they're keeping the price of silver down so they can continue to buy. And people like the plebs are like, oh, silver's a dumb rock. It's never gonna go anywhere. I mean, and it's like, no, it's never gonna go anywhere until it's convenient for them to let it go somewhere. And it's going to the freaking moon as a checkpoint, and then it's going to Mars after that. And it's probably going to Pluto, because, like, dear NASA, your mom said I was big enough. That's the best shirt on Pluto. I love the Pluto shirt. But anyway, I mean, this is the state of the Western world, of the Western culture in general, is like, these idiots don't realize that at some point in time, tea got taxed at 6%, bodies dropped, the biggest superpower in the world got beat by peasant farmers, and it was a nasty 6-year period of wartime. And then the decade that followed after that was the real war. When the king left, and the British left, and all rule of law left, and there was just a bunch of colonialists and a bunch of former colonialists that didn't support the revolutionaries, oh, that's when the real war started. And so, I mean, hopefully history doesn't repeat. But the way I look at this is, if it doesn't repeat, you're going to be fully enslaved by a banking technocratic class that will be very hard. It'll be very hard to get out of it. I mean, it's like being in the Dark Ages. I mean, it literally took 600 years. Like, you have this Renaissance period where like Da Vinci and all this stuff is happening, and then you have like this 400 to 600 year period of like shit, where you go from like hot tubs of the Roman Empire and flowing toilets, and like just awesome, like wine flowing, like just no crime rates, like it just balling, right? To like people looking at the aqueducts going like, huh, I wonder what those are. What do you think those were? To taking the bricks off these amazing engineering pieces and to build mud huts with them. Like, that's where society went for 600 years. And it's like, yo, everybody in the Western world has this assumption like, oh, well, this is just gonna like technology is gonna be awesome. We're all gonna have self-driving cars and flying planes, and like they're just gonna like fly us around and stuff, and like, you know, our iPhones are gonna make us Big Macs and stuff. It's gonna be awesome. And it's like, the hour is getting short. It is still possible, but by 2030, I would say the time has moved on. And I just don't know if the plebs really see this happening until they do. And I'm still optimistic that like they will see this. You know, as people start to drop. I've already had a few people die. That disease, it was terrible. I don't know anyone that died from that though. But those that were trying to avoid it, certainly. And it's like, I wonder if they'll wake up and figure this out. I wonder if they'll turn off their iPhone. I wonder if they'll get off of TikTok. I wonder if they'll actually start growing their own food. I wonder if they will get off of chlorinated water full of estrogens. Like, I just wonder if they will actually, like, you know, put together, like, why is the testosterone rate in North America literally at an all-time low? Like 80% off of an all-time, like, that's how low it is, compared to men of former decades. Or if they'll just continue to be more fake and gay, and just allow a very small class of people to continue to inflate their currency away, which is fine, because it's not our currency, it's literally the elite's currency. But yet, how long will these idiots, these plebs, stay in their stupid currency? I mean, I get it, we have to pay bills and things like that in it, because that still is the norm. But there is this like release hatch over here in the form of metals, blockchains, and cryptos. Meaning, you can hate cryptos, but you can love the blockchain and just put your crap in a vault chain, and now you're trading silver, gold, copper, whatever from your phone, and you can continue on with your fake and gay Western life. But if this continues to go on for maybe another 5 years, maybe 10 max, you're gonna get fully enslaved. And the only way out, once you get really close to being fully enslaved, is to literally dust off your rifle, which a lot of people like don't have and are not prepared to use, and also can't mentally picture what that life looks like. I'll tell you this: there's no electricity. There's no, like, if you don't have your own well, like, there's no water. Like, the grocery stores aren't stocked. Like, you're not getting car parts for your situation. If you're going to wait that long for that moment in time because you had an opportunity to audit the Fed, to check your people, to be like, hey, so why is the interest rate not 9%? The inflation's 7%, it needs to be 9%. Well, that's because the end game of the central bank is to be the buyer and lender of last resort. They're going to own and control all of it, and they're going to do so and slowly enslave an entire nation and wipe out an entire class of people. It's going to happen. And it's crazy because it's like, well, there's not really much you can do about all these plebs. I mean, you can just get on the right side of this trade. You know, literally invest the way that they invest, get ready for it, have very little commitments, if any. It's not the right time to use debt at this point in time. Like, in my opinion, like, oh, is there going to be a hyperinflation at some point? But wait it out, because they could always jack these interest rates and dump assets immediately on you. So it's like, maybe you got to wait a little bit on that. Like, we get a little closer to that event happening where the real inflation is 100 or 200% a year. And then, you know, when they're saying, oh, inflation is 9% now, that's probably more like the opportunity. But nonetheless, depending on how you play it, doesn't really matter. But I just want you to think through this stuff, because if you're not thinking through this, you're going to get absolutely fully enslaved. And I know it sounds absolutely insane to say that at this point, but I mean, look around your place. Like, if your store shelves and things like that are empty, you might be living in the Roman Republic towards the end of it. And you might want to go back to that history and look at what actually happened there, and make this one correlation. The Romans got fake, they got gay, and they got ransacked by the barbarians. And then it restarted again with a new, stronger regime. Not in Rome, but society moved on, and it moved to other areas. And then eventually you do end up in the Dark Ages. I mean, that's literally what happened, which worked out amazing if you're a medieval king. Like it's not a bad way to go. Like, I look at this and go like, hey, I'm not saying we're going back to the Dark Ages in my lifetime, but over the course of the next few generations, like, yeah, you can have people that could look at our society and be like, what are those? What are those things on four wheels? Or things that look like they had wheels back in the day? Like, it's possible. Like that you could get there. You could lose knowledge. But that's a little crazy for this point in time. I think that we're just kind of in this 80-year cyclical cycle, which typically goes with currency devaluations, debt defaults, and then wars. And I think that they're basically done with their last, little scam. And so now that whole entire narrative is falling away from the medical narrative, now we are opening up a war. So, like, what better idea than invading a former Russian territory in the middle of winter? Since we did so good in Afghanistan, let's do that. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. And let me know if you like this longer form content, these little longer 22-minute videos that works for you, or you like the shorter stuff. Peace.